Hello and welcome back to America's Forum on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. We still have Bob Wiedemer with us, who is the guy behind the Aftershock Survival Summit, one of our go-to guys when you get an inside take on the economy. Bob, it's great to have you stick around with us.
Certainly, John.
All right, so let's talk about, we were talking kind of about some of these conflicting reports that we're getting. It's so easy to get so focused on these numbers, but when you look at things in a broader scope, there's some real concerning things here for folks who just want some simple answers. When you look at consumer spending, it was up in December. Obviously that's expected when Christmas time comes around, the holidays come around, but consumer confidence is slipping. Wages have yet to increase, to rise with inflation. When it comes to consumer spending, are you looking for a negative year in 2014? Are Americans going to put their credit cards back in their pockets?
Yeah, I think there's a quite likely chance they will. The reason is that we had pretty good growth in housing prices last year, and we had pretty good growth in the stock market, to say the least. Both of those should have created a lot of confidence among consumers. Yet we didn't see that in retail sales in December, as you mentioned. In fact, this Black Friday was the first Black Friday in over 7 years to have a decrease in sales from the year before. And they weren't all going to online sales. Online sales increases are actually less this year than last year. So I am concerned that if they didn't get their mojo back after the nice run-up in housing and stocks, that this year's not going to be so good, because I don't think we're going to see that same kind of year in either stocks or housing.
Yeah, maybe the best example of this and the quickest reaction to this was after the Black Friday reports were announced. Best Buy stock price really took it on the chin. Best Buy and those big box retailers, maybe not immediately, but further down the road, are they doomed if this trend continues?
Well, I certainly think all retailers are in trouble, and I don't think it's just the online focus, although that's clearly part of it. I mean, online sales are about 6% of all retail sales, so let's not go overboard. That's clearly not going to help them. But doomed, yeah, maybe like Best Buy is doomed. Target, no, clearly not. They're going to survive. But you're seeing all retailers take a hit. That includes the weak ones like Sears and so forth. But I certainly think it's going to be a segment under a lot of pressure over the next year.
You talk about Target, Walmart, general stores, that have a more diversified product line to sell. But throughout the past, I don't know, say 25 years, 20 years, really right up until the 2008 start of the recession, there seemed to be an appetite for a big box store for pets, a big box store for sporting goods, everything like that. Is that the trend you see? Maybe consolidation back into a general store like a Target or a Walmart, something like that?
Well, some of that, absolutely. I think a lot of it will focus more on the larger stores, even though I know Walmart's trying to move to smaller stores. I think what you're having is just a problem in retail. And what you just mentioned is kind of a leading indicator, is we're not seeing all those stores being built. In fact, I was just writing that we've had an almost 75% decrease in retail space construction since the pre-financial crisis times. And I don't just mean the year before, but frankly, we've been building about 300 million square feet of retail space since about 2001. So even during the bad times, we've been building a lot of space. This year we'll barely do 40, or last year we barely did 40 million square feet. So
is that a vastly underreported story in your opinion? This, yes. I guess, the trouble, the headwinds and the turbulence that are ahead for commercial construction.
Yeah, I think we are. That's an underreported story because there'll be some small rebounds. What we tend to do is we look at, say, housing, and we go, oh, it's up 25% from a year ago, forgetting that a year ago, home sales of 320,000 is about the lowest it's been since the early 60s, when we had a much smaller population. So what's really happening is we're underreporting the fundamental stories, how much these things have come down. They may be going back up, but nothing like what we had before. Again, the difference between 300 million square feet of retail space being built every year and 40 million now is huge. Now, it might go up to 40 or 50 next year, 45 or 50, but it doesn't really matter. Bottom line, it's a huge, huge change in our economy.
Now, we've heard the Federal Reserve, go ahead and say that the tapering is going to begin, no matter how small it is. Clearly, there's been an emotional response to that as well. We also have Janet Yellen coming in this week to take over the reins from Ben Bernanke. What do you think Janet Yellen's most obvious impact is going to be once she's fully entrenched there and in control of the Fed?
I think the biggest thing is that Janet Yellen is not going to be viewed as much of a friend of the stock market as, say, Alan Greenspan or Ben Bernanke were. And that's going to be a more subtle shift, not going to show up necessarily the first week or the first month. But I don't think people have the same, I should say, Wall Street doesn't have quite the same faith in her that they wouldn't have been or Greenspan to support the market. Not that she will forget about it or anything like that, but I think there's going to be a subtle difference there. And I think that people are overlooking it, just as we did in December or November, that any change in a Federal Reserve chairman is normally brought by a certain amount of uncertainty in the market. But moving to Janet Yellen, she's a different character from what we've had in Bernanke and Greenspan. Particularly, I think, she hasn't said it, but this is my own view, is that people are going to view her as different in terms of her support of the market. And I think that's going to be an issue, and I think that's part of what we're seeing right now, honestly.
Yeah, we talk about the turmoil and the uncertainty that's in the market right now, but you brought up an important point. Both when Greenspan and Bernanke took over, there was some turmoil. Some of that was because things were changing hands, but some of that was also baked in to the current economies at the time that they took over the helm. But Janet Yellen, I guess, at this point is a mostly unknown figure. We haven't seen her in a public capacity very much. She's not been in front of the cameras. We're going to get our first taste of her on February the 11th when she testifies before Congress. How important is it that Janet Yellen, give the American public and anybody who might be paying attention a good first impression?
Well, I think it's very important, obviously, but I still think that what we're going to find is we have seen enough of Janet Yellen in the public specter to know that she does focus a lot on employment. That's kind of her background. I think she'll try to emphasize that employment is very important. But again, I think she's not going to focus on how important it is to keep the stock market up. So she may make people feel good about her, but I think, again, subtly, I don't think she's going to give us the impression as much that she's there to maintain the stock market. That might actually make a broader public happy with her, but that may not keep up the stock market as well.
So the Fed Reserve has a dual mission to try and maximize employment and also protect the value of our currency. Do you think she's focusing on the wrong issue?
No, I think she's focusing on those, well, primarily the employment issue and economy, but I think there's been actually a triple mission by the Fed, and that is, those two you mentioned, but to keep up the stock market. The comment, the Fed's got my back, right? That's what we heard all during the first part of last year is, I'm not too worried about this market going way up faster than earnings or the economy because the Fed's got my back. And that's a feeling a lot of people on Wall Street had. And that's what they see in the stock market. It goes down, but for some reason, it seems to always pop back up. Good news or bad news. People have pointed out how very few real corrections we had in the last year, and that's absolutely true, because there is a feeling the Fed's got my back. So maybe they don't say that's their mission, but clearly, it was, and clearly that's what Wall Street thinks. And that's the mission that I don't think Janet Yellen's going to do as good a job on as Bernanke or Greenspan.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Bernanke and the Fed, they've tried to telegraph the next step, day one after Bernanke as best as they possibly can. And I say that from a relative standpoint. I know some people might be pulling out their hair about that statement, but they have tried to telegraph things a little bit. Do you think Yellen has the appreciation, as we saw with Greenspan and Bernanke, of how even the slightest word out of place, or even the size of their notebook when they show up to these talks before members of Congress and these committees can have a real big impact on the day's stock market and where things are going and trading?
I think she'll try to some degree, but I don't think that's in her. I think she's going to figure that her role is really to maintain the economy, to maintain the banking system from a crisis, and to try to maintain employment. So I don't think she's just by nature going to have quite the same sensitivity, or even will say that it's her job to have the same sensitivity to the market. I mean, she'll try to some degree. She knows that that's part of her job, but I just don't think that the interest or the skills are there to the extent they were with the previous two governors.
Yeah, sometimes people refer to the Fed as like the Wizard of Oz, maybe, but it's impossible to, I guess, overstate how important the Fed has become to and how intertwined it's become with our economy. Bob Wiedemer, that's what we have here. You can kind of break it down for us. Always great to have you with us as well.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
All right, coming up, we have former NSA Director General Michael Hayden. He'll be here with us to talk about the Sochi Olympics right after this.